It looked like a flawless, perfect launch. Then 72 seconds after takeoff, communications with the Space Shuttle Challenger broke off. NASA computer screens lighted up with flashing asterisks. The sky lighted up with a ball of fire. A scene burned into our memories. It all happened in less than a second. The explosion was as unexpected, of course, and just as huge.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union. But the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss.
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA as it's more commonly referred to, is the USA's successful space agency. In 1958, the agency was born under the drive of Senator Lyndon B. Johnson and President Eisenhower. NASA was made during the Cold War to rival the Soviet Sputnik. The Sputnik was created and sent the first person into space during the Cold War. In 1972, the first U.S. space shuttle, a reusable aircraft, was created and named the Columbia. The Challenger followed soon after. On October 21, 1981, the Challenger's construction was complete. In 1982, the Challenger was given its name after a British research vessel that sailed across the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. The maiden voyage of the Challenger was April 4, 1983. Later, Brian Dunbar, a NASA official, stated, "The discoveries made on her many successful missions continue to better mankind in spaceflight and in life on Earth." Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, was one of NASA's biggest triumphs. On June 18, 1983, Sally Ride rode the Challenger into space. That Challenger mission was considered triumphant since no American women had gone into space before. In 1984, after Sally Ride's mission, NASA, in an attempt to increase hype about the Space Shuttle program, decided to send the first civilian into space. NASA decided to send a teacher because they thought the public would have an easier time relating with him or her. The teacher chosen was Krista McCoff, age 38, an educator at Concord High School. She was chosen primarily because of her infectious enthusiasm. Her job was to teach 2 lessons, both on spaceflight. There were 6 other crew members selected to go into space on the mission. Judith Resnick, the second American woman to travel into space, and the first Jewish American woman was selected. Ronald McNair, the second African American to go into space, was chosen. Ellison Onizuka, the first Japanese American to travel into space, was chosen. Gregory Jarvis, an Air Force veteran who was chosen to be a payload specialist on the Challenger, was added to the crew rather lately in October of 1985. Michael J. Smith was the chosen pilot, and Francis Scobie was the commander. All 7 members of the crew were relatively young, triumphant Americans with prestigious titles to their names. Each crew member trained over 40 hours a week for their mission. The mission was spread over a week. Day 1 would hold checking a satellite entitled the TDRS. Then they would deploy it. On Day 2, the first teacher in space tape would have been filmed. Day 3 would bring programming and deploying a satellite called the Spartan. On Day 4, more teacher in space videos would be made as experiments continued. Day 5 would have the crew retrieve the Spartan. Day 6 would hold preparations for re-entry and a possible news conference. Finally, on Day 7, the Challenger was supposed to land back at the Kennedy Space Center. The Challenger's official name was STS-51L. The 5 in the 51 represented that it was scheduled for 1985, and the 1 represented that it was launched at the Kennedy Space Center. Finally, the L was for the 12th flight of the year. After numerous postponements which delayed the flight for about a full year, NASA was under enormous pressure to launch. Monday, January 28th, was the last day the flight would be postponed. The very next day, the temperature was below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. The launch should not have been attempted below these temperatures, but because there was no positive proof of this thought, the delay was overruled. They were told not to launch, and they decided 24 other shuttle flights went off okay. They were complacent, said Grace Corrigan, Krista McCoff's mother. At exactly 11:38 a.m., the Challenger was launched into the sky. Many Americans watched from their homes, at the launch site, and even from schools. At T plus 73 seconds, or 1 minute and 13 seconds, the Challenger exploded at approximately 48,000 feet. The last recorded data was when Mike Smith, the pilot, uttered, "Uh-oh." This was the first time astronauts had ever been lost in flight. Many Americans were confused as to what they had been watching. The public affairs officer described it as obviously a major malfunction. The truth was, NASA was actually guilty of an avoidable accident. Sally Ride and her crew were sent to find out what went wrong with the space shuttle. They concluded that the malfunction was a part of the Challenger called the O-ring. At an inappropriate temperature level, the O-rings would explode. The concern for the O-rings never reached the proper NASA officials. As a result, the launch pad froze over, causing the part to explode. Sally Ride said, "I am not ready to fly again now." Americans were outraged, and NASA found themselves in the middle of a political tragedy. The families of the 7 deceased astronauts were angry when the truth about the O-rings came to light. Evidence was found that shocked the nation. The Challenger crew did not die from the explosion. Shortly after the explosion, the space vessel fell into the water. Research showed that the impact on the water was actually what killed the 7 astronauts. The families of the deceased, angry, decided to sue the U.S. government. The families won the case and received $7.7 million. Jane Smith, the mother of Mike Smith, sued Morton Thick Oil, the manufacturer of the booster rocket that caused the explosion. No one in big business should be allowed to make a faulty product and then profit from it, said Smith, referring to Thick Oil's business, Thick Oil Incorporated. Jane Smith got $1.5 billion from the case. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space, said President Ronald Reagan after the explosion. The United States has come a long way in the space program after the Challenger explosion. Although the space race came to a close, many other triumphs happened because of the knowledge gained of what caused this tragedy. NASA learned what went wrong with the Challenger 51L mission and how to prevent it. After the tragedy, requirements about the thermal protection systems, or TPS, were modified. This is a triumph because even though the crew died, the vessel's explosion helped to prevent other deaths by that cause. Now America has such programs like SpaceX, and the nation is looking into making life multiplanetary. All the knowledge gained on every mission of the Challenger, including the failed one, brought the United States to this point. The Challenger's knowledge advancement is a triumph that still goes on to this day. In conclusion, before the fateful Challenger STS-51L explosion, the Challenger space shuttle was one of NASA's greatest triumphs until the spacecraft exploded into a major tragedy. The nation lost 7 astronauts, the government lost money, but the accident was investigated so nothing like the O-ring explosion would ever happen again. On Tuesday, January 28, 1986, the Challenger space shuttle made history, leaving a triumphant legacy and a tragedy behind it.